Welcome to Public House, intimate conversations with people making a difference in the Hudson Valley. And now, from Paula's Public House in Poughkeepsie, New York, here's Paula Young.
Hi, I'm Paula Young. Welcome to Public House. Today, my guest is Karen Smythe. Karen Smythe is the director of the Beatrix Farrand Gardens Association.
Yes.
Beatrix Farrand was a woman way ahead of her time. And although she wasn't a suffragette, she was making strides as a woman never had before, right?
That's correct.
Okay, welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
I can't wait to hear about Beatrix Farrand. Tell me about who she was, where these gardens are, what it is you do.
So we like to refer to her as a pioneer,
Okay.
because she was born in the upper class. She was born to the Joneses.
In New York?
In New York.
Okay.
And she was, it's thought that these are the Joneses that we are trying to keep up with.
I like that.
And yet her parents divorced when she was in her early teens. And
Which is also completely beyond the pale at that time, right?
it was very, yes, her father was in the papers for all the wrong reasons, rather scandalous. And so she stayed with her mother. Her aunt was Edith Wharton, and she created a career for herself. She apprenticed with Charles Sprague Sargent, who's the founder of the Arnold Arboretum at Harvard University.
Okay.
She toured Europe for 5 months, looking at all the gardens, all the incredible gardens all throughout Europe. And she was encouraged to look not just at the gardens, but at art and architecture. And
What age
did
was she
that.
when she was doing this?
She was in her 20s.
So it was just out of college.
She didn't go to college.
She didn't go to college.
No, but her mother used to have these Sunday afternoon salons with the likes of Edith Wharton and Henry James, and so I think just in her studies that she had an extraordinary education.
Well, I'm certain she did have nannies that taught her things. Now, why was she so driven for gardens? Tell me.
Well, she grew up, she liked to say that she came from 5 generations of gardeners.
Okay.
Her grandmother had a home in Newport, Rhode Island, and her grandmother would have her come into the garden. She had a beautiful rose garden, and she got to know all the names of all the roses, and Farrand referred to them as her friends, her companions. Her grandmother, Lucretia Jones, is known to be the first one to do an espaliered fruit tree, which is basically,
Yes.
sort of putting it against a wall.
Yes.
And her parents bought a cottage in Bar Harbor, Maine, that they called Reef Point. And
Which is where she died, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
she died in Bar Harbor, not at Reef Point, but in
yes.
Bar Harbor. And so she would spend her summers, and she'd be in the woods, and she'd find a plant, and she'd dig it up and bring it to her garden. And so that's really where she learned and created her love for native plants.
Okay, so now you are in Hyde Park. You are working at a national museum.
So it's the national park, yes.
Right.
So it is a garden that was designed by Beatrix Farrand in 1912, and it was designed for the neighbor of FDR.
Okay.
And it was designed for Thomas and Sarah Newbold.
And they were their neighbor, direct neighbor next door.
Direct neighbors,
Okay.
yes. And Thomas Newbold is a cousin of Beatrix Farrand, and his wife, which I think is kind of fun, she's Sarah Lawrence Coolidge, who is a great-great-granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson. So we have an additional
Another president next door.
Exactly. And they commissioned McKim, Mead and White to do a remodel of their home, which
Okay.
is called Belfield. And towards the end of that, they called Beatrix Farrand and said, would you come and design a garden for us?
Now, at that point, Beatrix Farrand's name had gotten out there. She had, through trial and error, and no one would really want to hire her because she was a woman, right? There was a bit of scandal there.
So in 1899, the profession of landscape gardening or landscape architecture was really just beginning. And one of the things that often happens when a new profession is coming about is a professional society is created. So the American Society of Landscape Architects was founded in 1899. There were 11 founders, and Beatrix Farrand was one of them and the only woman. So by the age of 27, she had already done enough to warrant being part of this organization. So she had done a number of writings, and her early clients were friends of the family, or friends of friends, sort of within her original circle of the upper class, certainly folks who had the money to do these extraordinary gardens. Her sort of longer term, more serious career of really kind of began around 1910, 1912.
Right.
And right after she designed the garden in Hyde Park, she was commissioned by Princeton University as their first consulting landscape architect, and she stayed with them for over 20 years. A couple years after that, I'm trying to remember the date, she started working with the Bliss family on Dumbarton Oaks, which is in Washington, D.C.
And she also, I read, did some work overseas.
Yes, she did a little bit. Dartington Hall is in England, is the one that I know might still be there. She did a little bit of work. She met William Robinson, who was someone who sort of pioneered the idea of wild gardens, where you've got your formal garden close to the house,
right?
And then the farther away you go, the more
free,
naturalistic it becomes.
Now she was a trailblazer. She was a woman. She was an innovator, and obviously an original. How did not many of her gardens survive?
Not many of them do, though I will say there was a book written in the mid-'80s that I think spawned a whole new series of interest about Beatrix Farrand. So there's Harkness Garden in Connecticut. There is in Bar Harbor, the Abby Aldrich Rockefeller Garden is a Beatrix Farrand garden. There's also Garland Farm is where Farrand died, and that was the home of her longtime gardener. Right. And so they built an addition, and so that was her last garden. So
how did you get involved in Beatrix Farrand's life and your interest in gardening?
So I've always loved gardening. My mother is a phenomenal gardener. She has an incredible green thumb. I do not follow in that ability, but I love being in the garden. I love flowers. I love, all things natural. What's around us really does matter.
We recently had the Hyde Park environmental
Visual Environment Committee.
Yes, them.
Yes.
Here in this chair, and they were talking about the same thing.
Yeah. And Farrand referred to that as well, when she talked about what she was designing at Princeton University, for example, she said what's around you has an impact on you.
How you feel.
And how you feel.
Absolutely.
And your preparedness for your studies, for example. And that was something that she would design for the feeling that you get. If you come to the garden in Hyde Park, I remember when I first walked in, I was still running our family's business and I'm wound pretty tight to begin with, but I remember walking in through this beautiful gate. It's a little bit like a secret garden.
My favorite book. I read it 22 times as a child.
Me too. My mother read it to me. It's very special. And so I walked in, and you have to take a deep breath. You have to just stop and go,
oh my goodness.
And my shoulders went down, and I'm now so fortunate to be able to be in that garden on a regular basis.
Now tell me where it is in case people don't. I had no idea about it until we spoke, so tell me how to find it.
Well, Farrand designed it as a private family garden, and she was successful. So it is the garden that's to the south end of Belfield, which is the big yellow building that you see as you enter the Roosevelt Vanderbilt National Historic Site.
Okay.
So it's on Route 9.
Okay.
And the garden there's no fee to go in. It's free and open to the public. It's part of the National Park Service.
Are there seats where you can sit and read a book?
Yes, and you can also bring, up on the terrace there are, and then down on the the main section is grass. You can bring a blanket, you can bring a baguette and a bottle of champagne and enjoy.
I was going to ask you for a tour.
Absolutely.
I can't wait.
Now let me tell you another thing. We have just completed, one of our missions as an organization is the education about Beatrix Farrand and her important legacy.
Right.
We have just completed a 3-year project of a documentary on Beatrix Farrand.
Okay.
And it premiered at the New York Botanical Garden, and it was selected for the Environmental Film Festival in Washington, D.C.
That is exciting. Where can we see it?
So the Hudson Valley premiere is June 1st and June 2nd. We have a special symposium that weekend. And
at the garden?
At the garden, and at the Wallace Center has a beautiful theater in there.
Which is part of
the National Park Service. Yes, that's the visitor.
This was amazing. I get choked up so easily anyway, but Byron said that it's not that he loves man the less, but nature more. I agree.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Karen. This is great.
Look forward to seeing you in the garden.
You know what touches my heart. Anything natural. Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you very much. This is so interesting. See you next week. Hi, I'm Paula Young, and I'm the proprietor here of Paula's Public House. Do join me for good food, good cheer, and good fellowship. We are here, we have fun, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. Come on down.